thank you all for being so prompt and well-behaved and disciplined and taking your seats so that we can start very promptly. Welcome to the Institute of Strategic Studies here at Bloomsbury House for this discussion meeting on NATO and European defence cooperation at Dutch perspective. I'm Nick Childs, I'm the Senior Fellow for Naval Forces and Maritime Security at the Institute. And here at the Institute, and particularly in the Defence and Military Analysis programme of which I am a part, we've been focusing a lot on what one might call the condition of Europe when it comes to defence and security. Amongst other things, we have produced, as a result of some of this research, a number of recent reports, including this, I think the latest one, that's just been published last month in association with the Hans Seidel Foundation, European Defence Policy in an Era of Renewed Great Power Competition. And as the report says, Europe is presented with a new defence and security paradigm, the return of great power competition, at the same time an unsettled transatlantic relationship, calls from across the Atlantic, but also from within Europe, for it to do more to defend itself and to contribute to international stability. The ripple effect of Brexit on European Union defence capacity and cohesion. Non-state security challenges also have not gone away, and there are other emerging concerns on the rise. All this has been stimulating debate across a range of problems, but not least of those has been how best to bind together NATO and European defence efforts more effectively. And the Netherlands has an important perspective on that, as a committed member both of NATO and the European Union, and also with a very international outlook. It's investing in important defence capabilities, but it's also had to make difficult capability trade-offs in the past. And it has invested heavily in integration and cooperation, including with particular allies like the United Kingdom, Germany and Belgium. So, given all of that, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome the Netherlands Chief of Defence, Admiral Rob Bauer. Admiral Bauer joined the Royal Netherlands Navy in 1981. In his operational time at sea, he commanded two of the Navy's most capable and impressive, in different ways, warships, the Air Defence and Command Frigate De Ruyter and the amphibious assault ship Johan de Witt, also blessed with famous names. On achieving flag rank in 2011, Admiral Bauer was appointed Deputy Director for Plans for Operational Policy and Innovation at the Ministry of Defence, so he's been grappling with a lot of these issues for the best part of a decade, and before his current assignment he was Vice Chief of Defence. So, Admiral Bauer, as I say, it is a great pleasure to welcome you here, and over to you.
Thank you. Well, all, good afternoon. Despite the virus, we were all here, so that's good. The plane was actually quite empty when we came to the Netherlands. There was about 20 people from Amsterdam, from Rotterdam, I must say, to London. And I guess normally the plane is pretty full, but we're still here for you, so that's good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind invitation to speak to you about international military cooperation here today. A few centuries ago, our predecessors would not have dreamt that we, the British and the Dutch, would be discussing this so openly and constructively. Fortunately, we as North Sea neighbours have now been respected partners for decades, and in a military context we work together in many, many areas. With great success, I dare to say, despite our cultural differences. And these differences are aptly expressed by Mr. Ben Coates, a British author, who writes about the Dutch and the Dutch culture. And one of his books is entitled Why the Dutch Are Different. Take the weather, for example. Small talk number one. The Brits would say, it might rain later, I'll take an umbrella. Whereas the Dutch would say, according to the graphs I downloaded, there is a 61.8% chance of precipitation between 9:20 and 9:30 a.m. But if I leave at 9:07, I can avoid it. Coates goes on to explain that planning a group activity with Dutch people is like planning a military invasion. What is the wind direction? What time is rain forecasted? How many millimeters? Is there a bridge on our route? At what times will it be lifted for shipping? And it is all very amusing to read from a Dutch point of view, because there really is an element of truth to it. Even if we can't always avoid the rain in our wet climate. But so can't you. The Dutch are real planners, and especially the military, and I should know, because from 2007 until 2010 I was head of the Department of Military Operational Planning at the Ministry of Defense, in the period that the Netherlands was one of the lead nations as part of NATO's mission ISAF in Afghanistan in the southern province of Realism. Incidentally, it was the area north of Helmand, the province where the Brits had command for ISAF. And at the time, the Dutch, together with the United States, Canada and the United Kingdom, had command of Regional Command South. It was a rotational command. Together, we took the initiative, outlined a strategy and set to work in this difficult region. And there I saw with my own eyes that you can only work effectively with partners that you trust. If you have a shared interest and work towards a common goal. International coalitions were set up for this purpose. At such times, our countries come together. Friendship is a very powerful concept, especially in this time, which is presenting us with more and more uncertainties. We all need allies, friends, to help us cope. Over the past few years, our coalitions, NATO, EU and UN, have come increasingly under pressure. And I think that is dangerous, especially in a time when the worldwide security situation is becoming more and more uncertain and volatile. And when we observe that there is a realistic threat from Russia, which on our eastern flank could cause a lot of suffering in the short term. With all that uncertainty, there is one thing we know for sure. If something happens, we need to move quickly. So what are we doing to make that happen? The Netherlands has made military personnel and equipment available for rapid reaction forces, and works together when it comes to, for example, securing the Benelux airspace, controlling external borders, intelligence, cyber threats, and the efficient deployment of scarce strategic air transport capability in the airways, let alone the larger, more continuous cooperation between the Dutch and Belgian navies, Dutch and British Marines, and between the Dutch and German army units. The JEF, short for Joint Expeditionary Force, is a special form of multilateral cooperation. This rapid expeditionary reaction force has been operational, with the United Kingdom as its forerunner, since 2018. 9 countries have joined forces and declared that they are ready and able to respond rapidly to impending aggression. The Netherlands contributes units of the Marine Corps and ships such as the Karel Doorman to the UK-Netherlands Amphibious Force. The Scandinavian countries, the Baltic states, and our 2 countries have joined forces in JEF in addition to the capabilities of NATO. Like-minded countries that help each other when the security of our citizens is at risk and our freedom is threatened. This initiative does not jeopardize the cooperation in the alliance, but offers additional security for the countries involved, especially in the so-called grey zone between peace and conflict, when instability is on the rise. It presents opportunities and deepens the bond we have as partners. NATO remains a solid foundation for the Netherlands. This is evidenced by the fact that the Netherlands was one of the first countries to contribute to the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force following the NATO summit in Wales in September 2014. Since then, my country has contributed air, land and maritime components to the VJTF and NRF almost every year, and has taken its turn to contribute fighter aircraft for the air policing task in the Baltic states. And last but not least, since early 2017, we have continuously deployed troops, presently 270, to Lithuania to participate in the German-led multinational battle group as part of the enhanced forward presence, together with Norway, Belgium and Croatia. In this way, we demonstrate our solidarity that is of vital importance to NATO and the Netherlands. We thus underline the importance of Article 5. An attack against one is an attack against all. And interoperability and readiness are a crucial aspect of that. That is why our military personnel participate fully in various NATO exercises, of which Noble Jump and Trident Juncture are probably the most well known to you. And it is why our military personnel are training, as we speak, as part of the exercise called Response, where British and Dutch Marines, their landing craft and helicopters, are carrying out integrated operations as the UK-NL Amphibious Force, operating from HMS Albion and HMS Johan de Witt. I noticed that after only a week, the British and Dutch staff had joined together to become one, in which the best elements of the two staffs have become the new standard, alongside contributions from the Norwegians, Spaniards, Germans, French and Americans. During the second half of 2020, in the EU context, the Netherlands, together with Germany, will form the core of the EU battle group, consisting of 3,000 military personnel. 2 companies of the Air Mobile Brigade, supplemented by Apache combat and Chinook transport helicopters, and a C-130 Hercules tactical transport aircraft. The units are ready to intervene rapidly and robustly in countries in which the situation is or threatens to get out of control, or to offer humanitarian aid or facilitate evacuations. These 4 examples, the JEF, the VJTF, EFP and the EU Battle Group, show that the Netherlands has consciously made the decision to contribute to various small intervention capabilities in multilateral NATO and EU coalitions. We are aware that we should not wait to respond until something actually happens. There is far too much going on geopolitically for that to be an option. This is in line with our conviction that the threats in the world call for a standby force. That it is in all our interests that action can be taken quickly when conflicts break out. Cooperation is indispensable for this rapid intervention capability. And, as I earlier mentioned, trust in each other. But you can only trust one another if you are honest about what each partner is able and willing to provide. And that is not always an easy discussion to have. For example, the Netherlands has recently chosen to participate in the French-led EMASO mission because it has a diplomatic component in which the Netherlands has also taken important initiatives. This suits us momentarily better than the US-UK-led IMSC mission in the same area. In addition, there is a dissonance between what is militarily necessary at any one moment and what is feasible for the military at this moment in time. In view of the increased threats, we have therefore agreed, as NATO partners, to adhere to the agreements made at the Wales Summit, and the Netherlands is one of the partners that still has a long way to go. The years of cutbacks to Dutch armed forces have done serious damage. On top of the additional 5.5 billion euros that this cabinet has invested in the armed forces, defence has been allocated extra additional budget as of 2020, which will be spent on realising part of the national plan that we submitted to NATO in December 2018. For the Netherlands, the priorities of that national plan are additional F-35 fighter aircraft, the cyber and information/intelligence domain, strengthening Special Forces combat support, and extending firepower on land and at sea. The current state of affairs is that with the additional budget that was allocated for 2020, 9 of the intended 15 additional F-35s can be purchased, and some investments can be made in intelligence, cyber, and specific combat support for Special Forces units. It is a start, but we're not there yet. The new investments mean that units can be where they need to be more quickly, can operate with greater power, and can sustain that for a longer period. It is important to bear in mind that if the European member states acquire all the capabilities that NATO asks of them through the NATO defense planning process, then Europe will be in a better position to stand on its own feet, something the Americans are pushing for very much. So as far as the Netherlands is concerned, this kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And in that light, we must no longer deviate as far as I'm concerned. We owe that to our allies, including you. Ladies and gentlemen, I will draw to a close. Uncertainties and the threats around us call for allies, friendships that cannot be bought. And I know that may sound a little odd, coming from a Dutchman, bearing in mind the many English expressions about the Dutch being close-fisted. But I mean it. It calls for allies that trust each other, that dare to be honest, and that dare to operate together when the need arises. Who want to join forces and invest in interoperable and useful capabilities which serve joint interests. That is why the Dutch Armed Forces contributes military capabilities to various partner initiatives and coalitions, including by providing rapid reaction capabilities. Cooperation gives us options. But the present operational readiness of our armed forces also forces us to make choices. On the one hand, this means that thanks to the additional financial means currently available, or that will be made available in the future, we can again invest to modernize our armed forces and improve our deployability. Not only can we strengthen ourselves in this way, but also the alliances we are part of. On the other hand, it means that at this point in time we sometimes have to disappoint our allies because other initiatives suit us better. We do not like doing so, but as former head of the planning of defense operations and now as chief of defense, I know that better than anyone. But it is the realistic and honest answer that we must give, and which we do give, because we trust each other. I would like to end my speech as I started it. These days, the British and Dutch have risen above the differences in each other's culture. We laugh about them, partly thanks to author Ben Coates. We are respected and solid partners, and we have been working together operationally for many, many years now. The United Kingdom is one of the Netherlands' most important military strategic partners. And therefore, I hope that you will stay in touch with the Dutch. I would like to invite you to respond to the theme of my speech, to ask me your questions, and to share your vision with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Bauer, for absolutely delivering on the exam question, as it were, in terms of the Netherlands' perspective on the various and complex issues that are being grappled with in the defence and security environment. As you say, we now come to the main discussion part of the session, where I invite you in the audience to intervene with questions and thoughts. When you do so, and if you catch my eye, please would you, for the courtesy of all concerned, identify yourself and any affiliation if it's appropriate. I won't take the privilege of the chairmanship and master of ceremonies role by starting with questions, because I can see Ewan Grant from the Institute of Statecraft has already caught my eye. So Ewan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Admiral. As Nick said, Ewan Grant, former UK Customs Service intelligence analyst for transnational crime, the ex-Soviet Union. I'm also Scottish, so I've got no problems about remarks about pub-fistedness and so on. My question is, I could have asked a question about how the Netherlands plays a grossly disproportionate part in tackling strategic organised crime and the geopolitics of that. The problem being that role and that importance isn't as well understood elsewhere as it should be. I think that's a very real problem. But on a more immediately military matter, the F-35, and I realise there's limits on what you can say, but we hear a lot of criticism of the aircraft, but is it becoming the lodestar of the early stages of the information network, trusted wingmen and all this, and fusion of capabilities and information exchanges? How big of a leap forward is it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I understand you're both ex-Soviet Union and Scottish, or what? Okay. The short answer to your question is yes. I think the F-35 will become a game changer, and I think already it is becoming a game changer. There's a couple of countries now that actually operate with the aircraft, learning to operate with it. It is a vacuum cleaner when it comes to data. I think in general the aircraft brings back an enormous amount of data. I think it will be able to fight the fight from a longer distance than the present aircraft. I think it will be much more an aircraft directing the fight than fighting the fight in the future. But in the beginning of a fight, when all the mobile, more advanced air defense systems are still all up and running, it will be necessary to use the F-35 as a fifth-gen aircraft to fight that, the whole system, the A2AD system that, for example, the Russians have. One of the most important reasons why the Netherlands eventually chose, after 15 years almost, or 13 years of discussion, to choose, when we chose the F-35 as the replacement of the F-16, was that we would exclude parts of the world for operations if we hadn't done it, because of these advanced air defense systems. And I think that is one of the reasons why, that if you want to truly participate in that part of the fight everywhere in the world, you need to have the best sort of aircraft, and that is one. Secondly, if you look at the F-16, we all bought the F-16 as an air-to-air fighter aircraft, but after 20 years we started to use it as a air-to-ground aircraft to support ground troops, and we changed the aircraft for it, the software. We changed the sort of bombs we were using. We changed the training for the pilots. We changed some of the sensors. So we were able to use the aircraft much longer, because the new role was we were able to use it for another 20 years. So we used this aircraft for 40 years. And I think if you buy a new type of fighter aircraft, you better buy a young, in terms of technology, a young aircraft, so that you can use it for a much longer time.
Thanks. In the front row, my colleague Henry Dodds.
Henry Boyd.
Henry Boyd.
Thanks, Dan. Henry Boyd, I'm a research fellow here at the Institute. One of the key planks of NATO defence cooperation over the last year or two has been the 430s or 4x30 initiative. I wonder if we just ask you whether the Dutch commitment to that initiative has now been sort of firmed up in terms of detail, and whether there has been any tension created between the requirements of that initiative and other multinational defence cooperation capabilities the Dutch have understood.
Yes, it has increased the tension, because basically the question of the leadership in NATO was to increase the readiness, basically between the VJTF and the NRF. VJTF is 3 to 7 days, and the NRF is 30 days and further. So between the 7 or 10 days and the 30 days, there was nothing, basically. And so they said, use the existing capabilities, but make sure that they are more ready. And so that means that we have not decided to buy more kit, but we have decided to do something about the readiness of the kit that we have. And there is already a lot of strain on the organization to have the kit that we have as ready as we earlier agreed. And now we have to do more. And we have come up with some contributions in the NRI initiative, NATO Readiness Initiative, which is this filling the gap between 7 and 30 days. But it is a difficult problem, but it also shows something else, and that is that the leaders in NATO, the government leaders during the summits, they agree every year on a new issue. So this is where we are. And this is Wales, and then came the next summit, and then came the next summit, and we came up a little bit with this. This is the organization, this is the capabilities, this is the people who have to do all what is being thought up here. So this is increasing faster than the money, and this is increasing faster than, for example, the ability to build capabilities, to get the ammunition that is extra needed, etc. So this gap is, for me, the credibility gap that is increasing. So it is good that the last summit, I think here in London, we didn't have another step. So we basically said, okay, let's try to focus on making sure that this is coming up instead of this going up. So it is one of the big challenges at the moment. Another thing that I found interesting is that, and I talked to my colleagues, chiefs of defence, about this, the last chief of defence session we had in January. At the end of 2020, there is $130 billion dollars extra in terms of defence spending in NATO, and by 2024, that's 400 billion extra defence spending budget. What I do not see at the moment is additional production capability in industry. So what we actually see at the moment is that the prices go up because the production capability remains as it was. So everybody wants to have more ammunition. Everyone wants to have more submarines, frigates, tanks, vehicles, airplanes, UAVs, what have you. But the production lines are basically what they were. So as an economic principle, the prices go up, and it's not a good thing if we pay more money for the same. So the industry needs to do something as well there.
Thank you. Jordan Hardwidge from MBDA Systems, and also lately of the IISS.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Admiral. My question is, how do you see European missile defence evolving, specifically in the context of PESCO and the other European defence issues?
Missile defence. If you're talking ballistic missile defence, then I think at the moment there is not enough going on in Europe, I think. Probably the Dutch are closest to having a complete system that is at least supported by a sensor that is being put on the air defense and command frigates now, that is tested and proven in terms of ballistic missile sensor. We are thinking the national plan I was talking about, but it's not funded, which is a bit of a frustrating thing for me as a chief of defense. But it is a good plan, but no money. But ballistic missile defense, in terms of the shooter capability, is part of that plan. And then we would be the first in Europe to actually have that capability.
Yeah, one of the really interesting investments, I think, as far as we're concerned. Bastian. Sorry, I actually do that.
Well, thank you very much, Bastian Gigeris. I'm the director of the Defense and Military Analysis Program at the ISS. Continuing a little bit in the vein of some of the previous questions and with response to the title of your talk. There's a budget conversation going on in Brussels right now that has an effect on the European Defence Fund, on the money that was meant to go to military mobility, and also to something that was called the European Peace Facility. But I'm not going to ask you to comment on the budget, the politics of the budget, which I know obviously your government has a particular view on, others have other views. But I wonder, from your point of view as a chief of defence, and how important is it to get the European Defence Fund and all of these, and the money for military mobility approved at full budget plan. What worries me is that there was a lot of talk in continental Europe, I'm German so I'm allowed to say this, in the last couple of years that made great pronouncement about how much has been achieved, but it was all dependent on these things now happening. And financial incentives being created for collaboration to be taken forward, and for the European Defence Fund to fund all these passport projects, and everything was related in order to get to European capabilities in the end. And now we have governments fighting over the money that's meant to be allocated, which is over the years of the multi-annual financial framework, a small percentage of defense spending. We don't seem to be even able to find that money, which seems to me to be a fairly significant failure of political will. Is this something that worries you as Chief of Defense, or do you think, you know what, this is actually only marginally useful to begin with, and I can live without it?
Well, there's a lot of things that I worry about as Chief of Defense, and one of the things I mentioned in my speech is the lack of cooperation. That's one of the serious concerns for me. That there is a decreasing will to actually cooperate and to solve problems together. But apart from, interestingly enough, I mean, Europe as the EU has, for a very long time, not been too interested in defense. And there's many things that Europeans do not agree with the EU, but one of the things that the European people have told the EU is basically security. That is one of the issues we actually agree on, that the EU should do that. So it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that there's suddenly, and that's interesting about Europe, suddenly there's a lot of money available for defense. It's not for defense buying, because we're not allowed by the treaty to buy kit with EU money. So we're not talking about buying capabilities, but we are about, EDF is about funding studies to develop European defense capabilities. Now, one of the issues there is, of course, that there's a limited number of countries with large industries. So there is a worry, a concern in the smaller countries that the money of EDF all goes to the big industry to build the 6th gen fighter, or the European UAV, or all that sort of thing. So I think it is very important for the for the ability to share the outcome of those decisions, that in the different countries people see some of the money returning to their industries. So I think that is a very important thing. Now the PESCO projects take part of that problem, are part of the solution. In terms of military mobility, it is not only about the infrastructural changes. There's about 6.5 billion euros available for infrastructural improvements in Europe. Now that sounds as a lot of money, but if you start, building roads and tracks of trains and things like that, then the money is actually fairly quickly gone. 6.5 billion. So it sounds a lot, but I don't think it actually is. But it is not only about infrastructure. It is also about regulations. There's parts of your country where you are not allowed, where we are, as the military, are not allowed to transit through with military traffic, with military convoys. So within Germany, we have to drive around certain parts of Germany to go to the south of Europe. There's still a lot of hassle at the borders. There's still a lot of paperwork to be done. So when war is there, we have agreed there's no barriers. You can drive through. But in the grey zone and in peacetime, it still is there's a lot of regulations basically against it. And the third thing I would like to mention, apart from money and the regulations, is the societal resilience. I think that is probably one of the major issues I'm worried about. If we are starting to move a lot of stuff around Europe, it will not have an effect on our daily life. If we have to arrive at Friday evening in Lithuania, we probably have to start moving in Rotterdam on the Monday morning at 7 o'clock. And then somebody calls me and says that's not possible because then it is traffic time. Everybody wants to go to work that morning. And then it might be necessary to tell your own country, and your own people, you all have off this morning because there's military traffic on the railroads, on the roads, because it is necessary. And that discussion of societal resilience, how much distraction do we allow the armed forces to have on our society? Everybody wants to live 5 minutes from the airport, but nobody wants to hear the noise from aircraft. And the same with military equipment. If you start using it, it will make noise. If you walk the dog in the forest, you might find yourself facing soldiers trying to exercise. And all these things were more normal 35 years ago than now. So why the hell are you here? I'm walking my dog. Yeah, we are exercising, preparing for our job to do, to have peace for a longer time. So societal resilience is one of these issues where I think we should talk about more often.